Hey folks, Zach Osterman here, Insider Indianapolis Star, talking to you about, the final today, Indiana 83, Maryland 78. Obviously not in College Park, had some travel issues that wound up precluding me from getting out there, primarily of my own making. Indiana, just a very good day, I think it's fair to say, for Indiana. Struggled with turnovers in the first half. That was really kind of what built. They were down by 10 at halftime, and that lead stretched kind of to 16 right after halftime. A lot of that really was just on kind of the combination of, points off turnovers for Maryland. Maryland finished with 14 points off turnovers. They had 10 in the first half. And then a little bit, too, of that, kind of sidecar to that, Indiana just not really valuing offensive possessions the way they needed to in the first maybe 20, 22 minutes. But they just caught fire in the second half. They made 15 of their first 20 shots in the second half. They wound up only missing 7 of 26 field goal attempts in total in the second half. Didn't go crazy from behind the three-point line, but the guys they needed to make them did. Anthony Leal had one. Xavier Johnson had one. Gabe Cupps had one early, and Mackenzie Mbako had 4. He looked, very much the top 10 recruit today. 24 points on 15 shots. Hunting his offense, confident shooting off the bounce, confident shooting off the catch was a really, really big part of that second half. I'm just sitting here looking at the box score while we talk. He had 18 of his 24 points in the second half. Trey Galloway and Xavier Johnson combined for 25 points, it should be said, and 10 assists, as well as 8 rebounds. I think Mike Woodson will feel really good about kind of his backcourt in the game that they gave him today. And then the turnover piece of it, Maryland only had, I think, 2 or 3 at halftime, and Maryland was beating Indiana 10-2 in points off turnovers at halftime. Second half, Maryland had the far greater problems with turnovers. They turned the ball over 7 times in the second half, and Indiana took much, much bigger advantage of that. Wound up actually from -8, finishing +1 in points off turnovers in the game. And I mean, it was Indiana deserved a lot of credit for the way that it got out and ran. Indiana finished with 20 fast break points. Deserved a lot of credit again for some of the shot-making ability of some key guys, but also the persistence of a guy like kel'el, who Maryland was clearly intent upon taking away. And yet that didn't affect Ware's rebounding. He finished with 15. It didn't affect his defense in the way that he only had 2 blocks. But the way that he kind of, just the intensity he showed, the presence that he kind of kept around the rim, and Maryland just kind of really struggled to maybe sort of find that sort of 6 feet and in offense as the game wore on, primarily because of kel'el Ware, and he did finish with 9 points, all of them in the second half to go with those 15 rebounds. And I mean, maybe the most, I won't say shocking, although obviously Indiana has struggled with offensive consistency this season. I mean, Maryland coming into this game was the most efficient team defensively in the Big Ten in league play. And that was particularly down to their ability to limit opponents' shooting numbers. They weren't a crazy elite turnover team or something like that. They were just very, very, very tough to get and make good shots against. And Indiana, frankly, turned that, completely on its head. They weren't even necessarily terrible in the first half. They weren't great. But they still hit 5 threes in the first half. They hit all 4 of their free throws in the first half. And then in that second half, again, I mean, if you look at the overall box score, 19 of 26 from the floor, 2 of 5 from 3. Part of that was because, frankly, they didn't need to settle for threes. They were getting everything they needed at the rim. 10 of 13 on free throws. They only allowed 1 offensive rebound in the second half. They had 8 assists on 19 made field goals in the second half to just 5 turnovers. They were just really, really good, really efficient offensively against a team that – in Maryland that, frankly, has been tough to score the ball consistently against. It's been really offense that's kind of let Maryland down more often this season. But man, it was defense on Sunday. So this is the Hoosiers' first win streak in 2024. Obviously, they come off of the Wisconsin win, and this is their first back-to-back wins since those last guarantee games after Christmas. They're at Minnesota on Wednesday night. I suspect, because at least as things stand right now in the net rankings, Indiana's going to have 7 quad 1 and 2 wins. There's maybe going to be just a little bit of a, can Indiana push its way back onto the bubble? My suspicion is that that's that's still pretty highly unlikely. I think a lot of things would need to break Indiana's way. But if you're Mike Woodson, if you're Indiana, I think the best you can do is just sort of say, hey, let's try and be playing, we've got a little bit of something going here. These next two games are certainly winnable. Minnesota on the road. Obviously, if you're Indiana, you're 8-10 in the conference, so they're definitely losable too. But Minnesota on the road, Michigan State at home, those are games that if you're Indiana, you shouldn't feel like there's just absolutely no path to winning them. And I think if you're IU, if you're Mike Woodson, you say, to use Woodson's term from that Wisconsin game, just keep trying to validate this, keep building on good performances and putting other ones on the floor. Tonight's the sort of night where, I guess just this afternoon, I should say, is the sort of game that, a month ago probably would have gotten away from Indiana in a really pronounced way. And it looked for a little while like it might. Again, Maryland led by 16 points with 17:51 left in the game. And from that point on, Indiana outscored Maryland. I'm looking at the numbers here, 38-17. So, that gives you a sense for just kind of the way that Indiana rallied in this game. And again, we've seen Indiana do this before. They did this when they were down 18 at Ohio State. They came back, and that didn't really lead to much. They lost their next 4 games. But if you're Indiana, I think all you want to do right now is just say, today was a good day. Let's stack good days on top of good days and just kind of see where you wind up. At very least, maybe get yourself to a place where you're not playing on Wednesday in the Big Ten tournament, where you carry a little bit of momentum to Minneapolis and you just kind of see where it takes you. So Hoosiers are, let me make sure I get this right before I give it to you. Hoosiers are 16-13 now. They're 8-10 in Big Ten play. They've got Minnesota away on Wednesday night. Just for the record, if you're watching this, this is about 4:45. We're doing this video. Nebraska plays Rutgers on Sunday night, so this is about a little under 2 hours from now. Rutgers is at Nebraska. It's in Lincoln. Indiana now holds the head-to-head tiebreaker, obviously, with Maryland in terms of overall record. Indiana also holds the tiebreakers with Ohio State and Michigan, the other two teams below them currently in the Big Ten standings. They'll move a half game up on Rutgers. Rutgers has that tiebreaker if there are, sort of joint, if you get 3- and 4-way ties, the tiebreakers get a little bit more complicated. But in terms of head-to-heads, Indiana can't get the head-to-head off Rutgers. It's guaranteed the head-to-head off of Maryland, Ohio State, and Michigan. And I think you're really just kind of looking at, in particular, what Rutgers does in these next 2 games, because Rutgers is at Nebraska tonight, and then Rutgers is at Wisconsin on Thursday. And if they lose both of those games and Indiana can win one of its last 2, then Indiana will finish with a better Indiana will be at that point guaranteed to finish with a better conference record than Rutgers, and that would, if my math is right, and I'm doing it pretty fast here, forgive me, that would guarantee Indiana would start Big Ten tournament play on Thursday of tournament week in Minneapolis. We'll leave it there for now. Again, Indiana, I guess one last time, 83-78 win over Maryland. Hoosiers are 16-13, 8-10 in the Big Ten. Minnesota Wednesday night. Until then, for the Indianapolis Star, I'm Zach Osterman. We'll see you soon.